Hey, it's Jay with 1791 Actual. Thanks for stopping by for this ninth and final step in our series on setting up the Lee reloading dies. This particular one is going to go a little bit farther than others, and we've talked about. Let's see, we've talked about the decapping and resizing die. We've talked about a non-Lee die, which is the RCBS RAM Prime system. We've talked about the Lee powder through expansion die that expands the case mouth. We've talked about the bullet seating die. We've talked about the factory crimp die. We've also talked about the Lee combination. Where this is a 4-die set. So in this set, our bullet seating and factory crimp dies are separate. In a 3-die set, these two would be incorporated into a single die. You would have your bullet seating function and your crimp function. While it's not the factory crimp, as Lee calls this, the factory crimp die, you set your depth and your crimp all in one die. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other as far as setup time and consistency and efficiency. I personally think that these are a little bit more consistent in the result versus the combination die. We've also talked a little bit about why I prefer Lee dies over others. Things like they come with the shell holder appropriate to to whatever caliber the dies are for, and the benefits of their design for the decapping pin and how it mounts in the die. So what we're going to do today is, since we've seen how all these work, I took these guys apart, showed how they function, how they do what they do. So today we're going to actually step through. I'm going to take one case, one previously fired case, and we're going to walk through and take this from a spent case to a new round. So what all have I got out here on my bench? Well, I've got my my reloading center. It's got my caliper, a digital scale, my case gauge. It's a Ludec. It's called a Ludec brand handgun case gauge. It's got a powder pan, my chamfer and deburr tool, my primer pocket tool, a second primer pocket tool, just in case we get into there and that one's got a really dirty primer pocket. These RCBS primer brushes are really nice. I've already got my load card made out. I've got spare cards back here, space over here for pens and pencils, spare glasses, that kind of thing. Got my caliper back there on the back. I've got my die set that I need, my Lee die set that I need. I've also got this extra little tray that has my RCBS RAM Prime system in it. I've also got the regular RCBS priming arms. These mount over here, and I showed in a previous video how that priming system works. I've also got in here, in case I was using a Lee press, which I've got a couple of those. These are the priming arms for the Lee press. So I've got all that. I've got obviously my Rock Chucker Supreme. I've got my channel locks for snugging down all of the dies. And if you've been here, you've heard me say it over and over and over. Dies don't have to be tightened to what level? They don't have to be King Kong tight. They don't have to be Godzilla tight. They don't, you're not putting on a lug nut on a car. Okay. I've also got my beam scale back here. I'm transitioning, like I transitioned away from digital calipers. I'm transitioning away from the digital scale to an old school beam scale. And I've got my powder trickler. I'm not going to need it because I've already got my. I'm not doing single load precision loads. If I was doing like precision rifle loads or something like that, I would actually weigh each charge, and I would start a little bit low, and then I'd use my powder trickler, and you turn this, and it literally trickles powder into the pan to get up to the exact weight that I'm after. And you might notice my powder trickler is on a platform. Well, it's because I've got my beam scale on a platform. If it was sitting down here, I'd have to be doing one of these to get eyes on whether it's accurate or not. So I made a platform for it, which meant I needed to raise my powder trickler equally. Okay, I've got my loading tray, or one of my loading trays. This is an old style. It's got the loading block. It sits right in there. Got a place for my bullets. Got a place here for my primers. I've got my spent case that I'm going to use. I've got a bullet that I'm going to use, and I've got my primer that I'm going to use. Coming on around, I've got my logbook already made out with my data. Data matches what I put on my load card that's going to go in the ammo box. I've got my powder that I'm going to use, and I've got my powder dispenser. My powder dispenser I've already put powder in it. I've already gone through the calibration on it. I'm not going to walk you through the calibration. I actually am going to do one extra video in this series, I think, for walking through calibrating, how I calibrate my powder measure. So I think we've been all the way around the bench. We've got everything out that we need. Actually, we have a couple of things that we don't need because I'm not actually going to use the beam scale this time. I'm just going to, since I'm already calibrated over here on my RCBS powder dispenser, we're just going to drop our powder from it. And as always, I've got my powder dispenser right here, and I've got my powder right here. Powder dispenser and powder sit together wherever it is on the bench. Sometimes I've got it over here. Sometimes I've got it back that way by the monitor. So it varies where the powder measure sits prior to actually bringing it over here and using it, or bringing it over here to use it. But my powder, the only powder on the bench is the powder that I am using, and it stays right by the powder measure, or the powder dispenser, all the time. Okay, so we've got everything ready to go, and we're going to go ahead and stand our book back here. One of the things I use these spiral-bound journal books or notebooks from. I think I actually get these at like Staples or somewhere like that. But I like the ones with the hard cover on it. It's spiral bound, so it folds back nicely. It makes it smaller on the bench. But the fact that it's hardback, I can actually stand that guy back there, and I've got all my load data that I need. Just like I've got my card on here, I've got my load data that I'm going to use is right there. So, all that being said, where do we start? Well, we start with our decapping and resizing die. And we're going to get our shell holder. So go ahead and zoom in there. Snap our shell holder in. Bring our ram all the way to the top. Screw that shell holder down, or screw that decapping die down, just until it touches the shell holder. Lower the ram a little bit. Give about a quarter turn. Come down, cam over on my ram. That's nice and tight. Grab our channel locks, snug that down. That's ready to go. I have my ram block in the side here that keeps primers from trying to dance out the wrong side. And I'm going to hang my primer diverter in press. And we're going to give you a split view here so you can actually see from both sides at the same time, see what's going on here. So now I'm going to take my case, slip it in the shell holder, bring it up, a little bit of pressure to put it in, drop the primer out, and we now have a deprimed case. So we're going to put him over here in our tray, open side down, because that shows that there's no that case needs a primer. Next, we're going to go ahead and take our primer diverter off, and it just hangs back there on the side of the saddle bin. Grab our channel locks. We can break our die loose. And put him back. Next thing we need to do is we need to take a look at our case and see what kind of condition it's in. So we're going to look at the case mouth, and we're going to look at our primer pocket. Well, our primer pocket is a little bit on the dirty side. I'm going to take my primer pocket tool, give that a little scrape out, and it could actually be a little bit cleaner. These RCBS type is it's actually some very, very fine wires, all brought very, very tightly together. It's like a little wire brush. It fits right in there. Give it a little scrub. Oh, it's nice and clean. Next thing we want to do is the top end. This is a chamfer and deburr tool. This is brass. This is solid steel. And the edges right here are a little bit sharp, such that when I put it in, here's squeak. That means that it's trimming just the tiniest bit of brass off of the inside of that case, the case mouth. Then we're going to flip it around. This end is for what we call deburring. Chamfer puts just that, a chamfer on the inner edge. The deburr cleans up the top and outer edge to make sure that there's no tiny micro burrs around there. So now we have our piece of brass ready for a new primer. Well, let's get our ram prime set up. To set up the ram prime, and in previous videos I've talked about the fact that this is the only die that I use that I actually have a lock ring that has a set screw in it. And that set screw is the old style that goes actually kind of digs into the threads, so that that's never going to go anywhere. I have this one. I have this one set to where it does absolutely everything that I need. It sets my primers between 0.03 and 0.05 below flush with the back of the case. We grab my channel locks, snug him. King Kong's nowhere in the house, so it's not going to be King Kong tight. So I'm going to move my shell holder up here to the top, and I'll grab my ram cap, snap it in where the shell holder would normally go. And we'll flip back over here to that dual view. Next, I need to find my small primer priming pin. That's this one right here. That just stands right in the top. I raise my ram, and at that point you can see where that cup actually protrudes a little bit above the shell holder. I'm going to drop a primer in, making sure that it is what we call anvil side up. In other words, the open side of the primer is pointing up, because that's what's going to go. That's what's going to be facing inside, so that when you touch off the primer, it can touch off the main charge and send our bullet down range. So that's in. We're going to lower the ram so that cup disappears. Slip our case in. Raise the ram. With other priming systems, you're actually pushing the case down onto the primer. With a ram prime system, and I've tested the Lee, the Lyman, and the RCBS. I fell in love with the RCBS and how it works. The Lyman is great in its design as well, specifically related to the priming rod. Problem with it is it won't. It's proprietary to use with a Lyman press. It won't fit in an RCBS. It won't fit in a Lee. So that's why I'm over here, and I strictly use the RCBS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to raise my ram, which presses the primer up into the case, and I can feel very well that it's seated properly, just nice and smooth and clean. So now I can pull my case out, and I have a primed case, and that primer is probably, I'm not actually going to measure it, but I would say it's about 0.03 below flush. So now that case is ready for a next step. So we're going to set him back in their tray, open side up. Grab our channel locks, and we'll unmount our RAM prime die. We'll remove the RAM prime pin, move the RAM cap. Once in a while that RAM cap gets a little bit tight in trying to remove it. There it is. We'll grab our shell holder out of the RAM die, and we'll move it back down here where it spends most of its time, on top of the RAM. So next, flip the screen there. There, that's better. Next thing we need to do is our case mouth expansion. So we're going to grab our case mouth expansion die, put our case in the shell holder, bring that RAM all the way to the top, and we're going to lower this die until it touches the top of the case. Lower the RAM, and I'm going to give one full turn. And as I bring the RAM up, I can feel it stretching that case mouth just a little bit. And I'll reach in here. I'll try setting a bullet in the top. And I've done enough of these to know that the one full turn isn't going to be enough. As you can see, my bullet won't sit in the top of the case yet. So I'm going to give it another full turn. Like I said, I've done enough of these to know that pretty much how much expansion I'm going to need. And see, at 2 turns, it's still not quite sitting in there. So we're going to start doing smaller turns now. We're going to give it a quarter turn. I felt it stretch a little further. We're almost there. Another quarter turn. And you're always better to do small moves than large when it comes to setting up your die. And that is, we're going to call that good. Because that bullet is actually sitting pretty nicely in the top of that case. Now, as with all of the steps, you can always make minor, finer adjustments. And in this case, I'm actually going to give this about another 1/8 of a turn. In which case, I felt it stretch just a little more. That's perfect. That's perfect. I can actually turn it sideways, and it's just in there, just enough that it's going to kind of hang in there. And now the bullet that I'm using, I didn't mention the case. The primers are small pistol primers. These cases are just reclaimed or recovered brass. The bullet that I'm using is a 180 grain Hornady XTP. It's a jacketed hollow point, and I like these. I really like these bullets. They expand well. They work really well. So now that I've got my case expansion set where I want it, as with any of my steps, I would come up here and tighten my my jam nut so that it's not going anywhere, and then I would go through all of the other steps, and just like with the decapping and resizing, I would set the die up, and I would take all of the brass that I'm getting ready to process, and I've got I have a tray back here. The tray that goes in the bottom of this reloading center. I have a tray all set up. I've got my primers in the primer flip tray down here. I've got all of my cases. I've got all my bullets. This is the next evolution of this tray. Actually, it's about 3 generations or 4 generations down. But I've got all these that I'm going to be processing later today. We'll go ahead and set that over there. But we're just focusing on one round so that we can walk through the whole process. So my case mouth is now expanded. I'm going to set him in the tray, open side up. He's ready for powder. And I'll pop my die out, reset that jam nut. I always spin the jam nut up to the top, up toward the top. That way, every time I reset my dies, I recalibrate my dies as part of my overall process. It's kind of a quality control kind of a thing. So, like I said, I've already calibrated my powder measure. So I'm going to grab my brass, and I would go through all 50 rounds in my tray, or 100 rounds if I've got if I'm doing a larger batch. And I would do my case mouth expansion on them. Then I would march through and I would drop my powder. So I'm going to bring my case over and put it up underneath. This nozzle gives you really good good contact. So I'm going to drop my powder. You notice when I made my upstroke, and I talked about this in a previous video, but I want to touch on. I've actually got my my powder dispenser set up what some would consider backwards. Normally, the way that most guys have them set up, this actuation arm is parallel to the charging chamber, and in its natural position, the arm is down this way, as is the charging chamber, which means the charging chamber is full. So in the native position, in the natural position, that charging chamber is full of powder. Well, I like to have the charging chamber up because that means it's empty. That way, if I'm doing adjustment, if I'm doing my calibration, instead of turning it to either allow more powder in or to push powder back up out of it, this is just making that adjustment while it's empty. And then I would fill the chamber and do my drop as I do my calibrations. Also, that means that my handle runs this way so that in natural position it is down. And I'll grab one of these pans, lift the handle, and I pause for a second and make sure that the powder is fallen into the charging chamber. Drop the handle, and I have powder. Now, before we go any further, I'm going to go ahead. I don't need that charge, so I'm going to go ahead and dump him back to the jug. So, I now have powder in here, and after I charge my powder, I would set my case, all of my cases, so now I would have all of my cases in here full of powder. I've got just a little El Cheapo flashlight, but it's very, very bright, and I kind of run that light over the top of all of my cases, and I'm not going to be able to tell that yes, these are perfectly at the grain weight that I'm looking for, but what I can tell is, did I miss any? You know, missing means that the only charge is going to be the primer, and it may or may not be enough to actually force the bullet to come out. It can cause all kinds of trouble. It's called a squib. And basically, it means that the bullet didn't go down the barrel, and it could be, if it's in a revolver like these will be, it may be partially out of the chamber. It may be blocking between the cylinder and the barrel, which is really, really hard to deal with. Or it could actually be stuck in the barrel. I can also tell as I do my overview, I can tell if I double charged. You know, if somebody interrupted me, you know, if I'm doing a video, or if I'm doing a live and I'm showing this on a live, and I see something on the chat that I need to respond to, if there's any kind of an interruption, I could potentially double charge, which is just as bad, if not worse, than a squib load, because a double charge, I could end up with enough pressure, depending on how much my intended charge is. I could end up with enough pressure to blow my gun up. So I've checked all that. Now it's time to seat the bullet. So I'm going to grab my seating die. Get it started. I'm going to put my case in, bring it up. I'm going to back out the seating stem quite a ways. Actually, until I start, I back mine out until I start seeing threads show up here, because I know it's not going to touch anything. And I take my die body down just until it touches the top of the case. At which point, I'm going to grab my channel locks, check to make sure that King Kong's not in the room, and I'm going to set my bullet in the top. This is why I needed it to be able to sit there on its own, because I'm going to move him up now and move him up into the die body, and I can actually feel a little bit of push because of the height that I took the stem out to. I can feel a little bit of push, and you can kind of see it started to seat it down. So now I'm going to give one full turn, only because I know with these bullets, I've loaded several of these recently, so I know that I kind of know how many turns I'm going to need in order to get my mouse to work here. There it is. I want to move shift that view just a little bit so you can actually see where I'm at up here. So I'm going to press that in, and I'm going to give it about half a turn more, and I'm inching my way down, and I'm going to give it about another half turn, and about another half turn. As with the expansion die, you always want to have small moves. And so now I'm going to start doing quarter turns. So I'm getting closer and closer. Each time I'm moving closer in, and you'll see on here there's what's called a crimp groove or cannula. And that cannula is basically where I want the end of my case to come up to, so that I know that I'm getting close to my cartridge overall length of coal. Uh, in some manuals, it's referred to as an OAL, overall length. In others, it's referred to as COAL, C-O-A-L. It's an acronym. It's cartridge overall length. That's what I originally started reading and seeing it called, so that's what I call it to this day. And I know that my cartridge overall length, my coal, needs to be at 1.575 inches. So I'm going to grab my caliper. First, I'm going to make sure that it is zeroed. And this one actually has two thumb screws. One on the top that adjusts the movement this way. One on the bottom that locks in the bezel. And I'm going to make sure that my bezel is set. When my caliper is all the way closed, my bezel is set on exactly 0. And I'll turn my thumb screw in. Then I'm going to roll this out. And it took me a while to learn how to use one of these. I had used, for about a year and a half or so, I had used a digital, and it was quick and easy, accurate, mostly accurate. I did have to change the batteries one time because it seemed like it was kind of not being consistent. Then I decided, if I can't get batteries, if I don't have batteries, or if I can't get batteries, I need to know how to use one of these. So I completely transitioned away from using that, except for when I'm doing something metric, because I don't have a metric analog caliper. So as I run this out, I'm at 1 inch. See if I can zoom in a little bit. I have my inch marks down here, and as I bring this out, between 0 and 1 and 1 and 2, I have 10. It moves up in 10/10ths increments. So I'm looking for, I know I'm going to be over 1.5, which right there is 1.5, 1.50, and then I measure my hundredths and my thousandths down here. And so 1.5, and I'm looking for 7.5, which I'm going to bring it around to 70, and 75. At which point I'll lock down this little thumb screw. So now that is set to 1.575. And I know if I check it, I know that that's way proud of where I need to be. So go ahead and do a quarter turn. And I think I can get another quarter turn. And I think we're going to only go about 1/8 of a turn. You'll notice every time I do this, I index my fingers cross from front to back in line with the frame of the press, so that I know that's a quarter turn. That's 1/8 of a turn. And of course, 4 quarter turns is a full turn. So I think we're going to actually go at about 1/8 of a turn. And another. And one more. And it's actually looking really good. You can see on there pretty much right at the cannula. And when I check it on my caliper, it's right. It is right there. I mean, that is almost too perfect. There. And it's exactly where I want it to be. So I'm going to grab my case gauge now. And I check it a couple of times in the case gauge. I do what I call a plunk test. You can hear it. It just drops right in. So that tells me that this guy's ready to go. Except he needs a crimp. So I would walk through all 50 rounds, doing my, because I've got this set to the right depth now. I would check it and put it in there, and I do check each one because since there's no lock nut on this stem, this could potentially move just a tiny bit, and I don't want that to happen. So I would check. I check every single one when I seat the bullet. So my next step is I'm going to pop my seating die out, and I'll reset my jam nut. The next thing I need to do is to set my crimp. I'm going to use my factory crimp die. Start that in there. Put my bullet back in the shell holder. Raise my ram. And I'm going to take that die body down until it touches the top of the case. It's actually quite a ways down, right there. And if you remember, I talked about in a previous session, we talked about how the how the crimp die works. It's got this stem in the middle that pushes a collar down onto that top of that case. So now I'm going to run this down until I feel a contact. And right there it contacts, and I can actually go ahead and give that a little bit of a twist manually. So we're going to start, and this one you want to really do small moves. I do basically 1/8 of a turn at a time, because different bullets actually like different amounts of crimp. For instance, a cast lead bullet, if you crimp too much, you're actually going to bite into the lead. You don't want to do that. Berries, you do Berries bullets, brand name. They're plated bullets. If you get too much of a crimp, you actually bite into the casing on it, and can compromise it, and you get some really weird results then. With these, I want that to just kind of start to curl into the cannula, and I'm going to do maybe a little bit less than 1/8. And that actually felt really good. And looking at it, you can see that I have a really nice roll crimp. At which point he goes in the tray, and where you can actually see the tray again. He's going to go in the tray with bullet side up, okay? But I'm also going to run him through case gauge again on a second plunk test. There it is. He's dropping in. That means that guy is going to chamber perfectly. So he's ready to go, and he's actually one of the cases that I had reserved one. These were all already deprimed, but I had reserved one to use for this demo. So of course, and everything has to be put away when you're done. I don't leave anything except for my loading center. I keep it over here on the edge of the bench. Just it's a handy place to put it. Doesn't occupy, that way it doesn't occupy any space over there on the shelf. And but there you have it, and there you are. That's the end of this whole series on setting up the Lee die, reloading dies, and see if I can get you all turned back around here so we can talk. And I'll actually look at you while I talk to you. There we go. So I appreciate y'all sitting in through all of these videos. I hope you found something really, really useful and interesting. Maybe you learned something new, saw something that you weren't familiar with. This is my methodology. Not everybody does everything the same way. We all get to the same result, hopefully safely. But this is what I have found that works for me, and some of it is fairly generic information. Things like making sure that cleaning your primer pockets should be something that everybody does. How you cinch your dies down, how you set the dies. That is how these dies are set, is straight from the Lee documentation that comes with every die set. They do a really good job of every die set comes with a little pamphlet that walks you through how to set up the dies. Now, the one thing that it doesn't do is a lot of times it doesn't do a really, really good job of covering how to set the combination seating and crimping die. A couple of things like that. That's why I actually did this whole series, because it's one thing to read it and kind of experiment with it. That's how I learned. I read it and tried, had some trial and error, had some failures. Had to pull some bullets because I screwed up really badly. But often people learn different ways, and sometimes it helps to see somebody actually do what you've read about. And that was the whole purpose of this series. Again, I appreciate you coming in, hanging out. If you have questions, if you're not sure about something, put it in the comments. I do read comments on all of my videos, but overall, if you have something that, and you think maybe I will, maybe I won't read your comment, drop me an email at 1791actual@gmail.com, and I'll get back to you. And if it's something, if we get into a discussion of something that it just seems like something that a lot of people might wonder about, hey, I'll put together a video response to it. So as always, thanks for stopping by. If you whatever platform you're on, like, share, subscribe, follow, all those good kind of things, whatever platform you're watching from. And if you found something interesting, you think your friends might be interested, think your friends could learn something, share it with them. And as always, in closing, God bless and see you on the other side.